Hello everybody, and welcome back to a historic video, which may seem a bit weird. I've obviously released Pioneer videos in the past, and with the recent announcement of the paper tournaments happening with Pioneer, Standard, and Modern, it's kind of weird to be playing Historic right now. However, I do have a reason, and that kind of centers around the free-to-play nature of Historic and, just Arena in general. Although I'm not a really big advocate of the economy in Arena. I think it can be changed a lot in many different ways. I still think that the free-to-play nature of it, to an extent, is very admirable in my eyes, and I think obviously the format, or I guess the client, I should say, has some work to do. As a very cheap college student, the allure of free-to-play is very nice to me. And, I just can't really afford to buy a whole Pioneer deck or whole Modern deck, that type of thing, or even Standard for that matter. But yeah, anyways, putting that stuff aside, I am pretty interested in the Historic format right now. I think it's pretty open. I think, the fact that Lurrus is still legal in it and the fact that the format is healthy kind of says something about how, the interactions are. I think that it's a pretty high-powered format, which obviously is very fun to do, fun to play with. It's kind of like Pauper in a sense, where you wouldn't think that it's very high-powered because, it's, digital only, kind of weird, that type of thing, but it still has very high-power level cards in it. And so, with that, I thought that I would make a video kind of analyzing the metagame, and then where I think the Rock and two other types of mid-range decks can really fall within the meta, and how I think they could be really good in the meta right now. And so with that, I'm going to start by reviewing the top 5 decks in the metagame, and then after that I'll present 3 deck ideas that I think will be really good at targeting those top 5 decks. So hope you enjoyed the video. Alright, and so to start with the review of the format, I'm going to be going over the top 5 decks as I already mentioned. So we have Phoenix, Arcanist, Auras, Azorius, and Orzhov, Golgari Food, and then Blue-White Control. And I think just doing this top 5 is pretty viable in the sense that a lot of these other decks, such as Jeskai Control, Joined Midrange, Gruul Aggro, even Vehicles, they kind of fall under the top 5 in a sense where, we're going to know that Phoenix is going to be very graveyard-oriented, and so Vehicles can kind of go with that with the relevance of Greasefang in the format. Same thing with Control with Control, obviously, and then Golgari Food with Gruul, those types of things. And so, first off, the most prominent deck that Goldfish thinks is in the format, and I think that it's the most prominent deck as well, is obviously Izzet Phoenix. Obviously surrounding around getting Arclight Phoenix in the graveyard, bringing it back with a bunch of these instants and sorceries, and then really kind of playing a tempo game. It could go long. Obviously, you could have really fast starts. The main thing with this deck, coming from a mid-range perspective, we really want control over the graveyard. Obviously, with Phoenix, with Channeler, and Ox, and then Crackling Drake to an extent. And then obviously we want the 2-for-1 potential. Storming Entity is probably the hardest creature to get rid of in this deck, just because it can't die to a Revolt of Fatal Push. However, all the other creatures do. Channeler and Dragon, Sprite Dragon, can die to a Witherbloom command if they don't have any Delirium or counters on them, which is pretty interesting to note. And in reality, kind of just want to play a tempo game against them. We want to have our nice discard, our efficient removal. Obviously, they do have a bit more card draw than us with Expressive Iteration and just all these blue cantrips, and I guess red cantrips with looting. However, just getting control over the graveyard in conjunction with getting those efficient spells out, such as Thoughtseize, Duress, Fatal Push, Blood Shifters, those types of things, is going to be really crucial in this matchup. Scavenging Ooze is a creature that comes to mind that's going to be really good in this deck, or in this matchup, I should say. And then other things such as Witherbloom Command could be pretty good, may not be. And then other sideboard cards such as Go Blank, Duress, those type of things are going to be really good against this Izzet style deck. Alright, and so the second deck that is the second most popular in the format according to Goldfish is going to be this Rakdos Arcanist deck. Very much a mid-range mirror in the sense that they have really big 2-for-1s that in many ways are better than the 2-for-1s we have, at least in green-black. So they have Seasoned Pyromancer, Chandra, Sorin, even Magmatic Channeler and Dread Horde Arcanist are going to be really good. I think the fact that they do kind of revolve around Arcanist is kind of actually kind of good for us, especially if we are on the rock, where this card dies to Fatal Push, Bloodchief's Thirst for 1 mana, and all of our other removal spells except for Witherbloom Command. So I think if we do come across this matchup, then we shouldn't be too worried about Arcanist, more so with the Seasoned Pyromancers and Chandras. And with that, we really want to focus on getting our 2-for-1s. So the Go Blanks are going to be really good with this matchup, especially with them if they're more focused on Kroxa. So yeah, getting the 2-for-1s and then just getting those efficient spells out, like Midrange is all about with the Fatal Pushes, the Thought Seizes, those types of things. And thirdly, we have this Azorius Auras deck. I've seen Orzhov variants of this as well, but obviously Azorius is going to be the most popular. And so with this deck, or with this matchup, the name of the game is obviously going to be getting these card draw creatures off the battlefield, or even getting them from their hand before they even enter the battlefield. That's going to be the primary focus of this game. Obviously that could be pretty hard with their other forms of interaction, such as Spell Pierce, Sentinel, and Savior. Even Lurrus getting back the cards from the graveyard can be a bit of a problem. So we really want to kind of play a tempo game, obviously killing the card draw creatures on the spot, trying to play around the taxing effects as much as possible in the interaction, and then playing a Go Blank or a Soul Guide Lantern, or putting down a ley line at the end of it to limit the potential of Lurrus. And if they are not able to get one of these creatures out, then the enchantments are going to do nothing in their hand, and then we could win from there. And fourthly, I think this is probably the second most popular deck in my eyes. I think Izzet Phoenix and Golgari Food are going to be the two most popular decks in the historic metagame, and so this is obviously going to be a big matchup for us that we really have to focus on as mid-range players. And so with Food, the two big cards that we really want to avoid, or just discard, or just not have to interact with in general, are going to be Deadly Dispute, which you're going to have to discard, and Trellicrums, which you can discard, but you could also remove with, say, an Assassin's Trophy, or even better, a Witherbloom Command. And so with that, we really want to avoid their 2-for-1s, obviously with the Dispute and the Trellicrums, and then just keep the board under control. Ravenous Squirrels can get a bit out of hand, so leave saving our Fatal Pushes and Bloodchief's Thirsts for them over Gilded Geese, or any of these other creatures is going to be very important. Same thing goes with Lurrus. And then post-sideboard, we have a lot more options to attack this deck from their graveyard, which they're going to be fairly oriented around. They're obviously a Lurrus deck, but they also have Witch's Oven that interacts with the graveyard, and even things like Bone Shards. And so, post-sideboard, we could have Leyline, we could have Soul Guide Lanterns, more Go Blanks. Those are the types of cards that we really want to get to, they're going to be, going to play them in turn 4, 5, 6 to really close out the game, to be able to shut down the graveyard, inhibit them from being able to recur anything off of Lurrus or get any sort of graveyard value. Finally, we have blue-white control, or any sort of blue based control decks. So with this matchup, it's pretty straightforward. With Neon Dynasty, they got more exile effects with the Emperor and March, which is pretty annoying because we really want to recur our creatures from the graveyard. So things that come to mind are like Skyclave Shade, or obviously buying back creatures with Lurrus. So those exile effects are a bit annoying, but other than that, it's pretty straightforward matchup. They are just going to counter a lot of your cards, going to kill a lot of your creatures, and then once they kind of run out of gas, you're going to want to obviously kill Teferis on site, Narsets on site, that type of thing. But after you get all that done, then basically kind of how it goes is either you just establish one creature, let's say like a Scavenging Ooze, or any other 2-drop creature or 3-drop creature, or even like a man land could be very good against this matchup, and then just kind of really focus yourself around that one creature, discarding any removal spells, any counter spells. Really trying to play around counter spells is very important in this matchup, so that can be hard at first. But yeah, trying to like focus yourself around that one creature, or that one or two creatures, preferably a man land. Obviously, is going to be really good against their wrath effects. And yeah, that's basically the name of the game against control. Alright, and now is the fun part of reviewing the decks that I think are going to be pretty well oriented in the format. So first off, I kind of gave a spoiler to this in the first half of the video, but this is just going to be my version of the Rock in Historic. So right off the bat, if you know anything about the modern format, you're going to be familiar with Reclaimer and Witherbloom command. Obviously, Electric Bob kind of popularized this deck, utilizing Reclaimer and commands to loop sagas. Obviously, we don't have access to Urza Saga in Historic. However, we do have a lot of unique land effects that we can utilize pretty well, and that are very valuable and kind of create a really nice versatile feel to this deck. So obviously Takenuma, Beside You, they're really big ones. And then the man lands, Castle Locthwain. I really like these cycling lands. And Lotus Field is really nice because if you get it off of one activation off of Reclaimer, then it instantly becomes a 3/4. That's going to be a really nice attacker. And then, just getting it back with Lurrus is really nice, just 1 mana 3/4 after, it dies or something like that. But yeah, other than that, just a very straightforward mid-range deck. Siphoner I've been really liking. Skooz, obviously great in the format right now, with Phoenix and Golgari Food being the top 2 decks in my opinion. Go Blank as well, just great being able to exile the graveyard. Same thing with Soul Guide Lantern. Lantern is great because you can recur it with Lurrus. I've in the past played cards such as Unbridled Growth that you can loop with Lurrus. I think that's a bit too cute right now, and I'm trying to focus this deck on more so the lands rather than recurring things with Lurrus, because it's a bit, obviously, a lot more hard to interact with lands than it is to interact with the graveyard. And then in the sideboard, Skyclave Shade is going to be great against any mid-range deck or control deck. Obviously, Duress is more graveyard interaction. Deadweight is one of my pet cards. Obviously, absolutely great with Lurrus, and great against smaller creature decks. And then Academ's Awakening, but Jukabog just has additional lands that we could tutor up. Obviously, cannot tutor up Awakening with Reclaimer, but we can put it onto the battlefield, sack it to Reclaimer. Oh wait, no, never mind. We can't get it back. I just realized that right now. However, it's really nice as a flip land, getting the value with Lurrus. Good against control decks and mid-range decks, like I was saying. I totally thought that you could tutor it up, sacrifice it, and then get it back with the Boon command. But I'm pretty sure that's not the case because the sorcery side is the initial side that you present. But yeah, other than that, Bojuka Bog is obviously great against Phoenix, any graveyard type of deck. And then the land base is just really nice, really clean, playing the full 12 of the dual lands, and then obviously all of the other unique lands. Secondly, we have a Rakdos midrange deck that is not really oriented around Horde Arcanist as much as it is oriented around cards such as Valky, Bloodthirsty Adversary, and Bonecrusher Giant. And so with that, we're able to play more of a long game, more of an interactive game, more kind of 2-for-1 oriented, with, obviously Bonecrusher Giant being probably one of the best 2-for-1s in the format right now, alongside things like Seasoned Pyromancer and Chandra. Basically with this deck, we want either very efficient removal or interaction with these cards, or just 2-for-1, lots of 2-for-1s basically. And so that's what this deck is all about. Obviously having access to red is what makes it unique. And with that we get the aforementioned Pyromancer and Chandra. That's really nice. Also Den the Bugbear is probably the best man land in the format right now. Probably Hive is the second best, but Den definitely the best one. And then Unholy Heat is a very unique removal spell that kind of has synergy, obviously, with Soul Guide Lantern. That is already a great main deckable card, I feel like, in the format, and that Fable Passage just to get the Delirium a bit better. As far as the sideboard goes, Skycliff Shade, as well, same thing with the first deck, just a great card to have in the control and mid-range matchups. Davriel is, I think, a really underrated card in the format. As you'll see in the third deck, it's kind of focused around this card that I really like. But yeah, just a great card against mid-range and control, like I've been mentioning. Go Blank, obviously great. Witch's Vengeance, I think, is really good. And then Bifrost for the one-off artifact deck that you may come into just off the hand. But yeah, other than that, I really like the fact that this deck is not very graveyard focused. Obviously, we do have Delirium on Unholy Heat and Kroxa, but knowing that the format is centered around Izzet Phoenix and Golgari Food, which are two pretty heavily oriented cards, or oriented decks surrounding the graveyard, I really like positioning myself in a way that kind of pushes anything associated with the graveyard away, and so we don't get kind of hit by any of the other decks that really want to focus on those two best decks by hitting the graveyard. And so with that, I really like that aspect of this deck. And finally, a bit of my own spice with this one. I'm not sure that this is going to be the best deck, but really cool nonetheless, and has some inspiration from some more powerful formats, like Modern. So this is just basically mono black, 8 rack, I guess you could kind of say, if you include Waste Not as a kind of discard advantage spell. Obviously the Davriel is kind of like the feature of this deck, alongside Nether Spirit, which we kind of uniquely get access to in the historical format. But yeah, basically the name of the game, make your opponent discard a bunch of cards, get value off of it with Waste Not, and then later value with Davriel, kind of closing the game off. And then you guys play some really cool cards, such as Mind Rake, just overloading it for 2 mana, getting 2 cards out of the opponent's hand. We don't really care too much about our hand in this deck, as long as we have some sort of advantage with getting the cards out of our opponent's hand. And we could, discard like another Spirit, or any other card that's just not relevant in the matchup, such as say like a Path of Peril if we're playing against a creature this deck, that type of thing. I really like playing the 4 Go Blank in the main deck, just because, as I've been saying throughout this whole video, basically, the graveyard is just a very vital aspect of this format. Obviously we have Sorin as a creature, this kind of game ender card that interacts well with Nether Spirit. Nether Spirit kind of being the most prominent form of winning the game, which I'm not sure if it's really too possible in the format, because Historic is quite fast, and so I'm not sure that we're going to have enough interactions to really keep Nether Spirit, being able to attack and that type of thing. But you never know. I haven't tested this deck out yet. It could be just very good. But other than that, we have more reliable ways to win the game with, Castle Lock Domain, and then namely Hive the Eye Tyrant is going to be really good to close the game out. We do get to play Inquisition in this deck, which I really like. I'm not playing Inquisition in any of the other decks, But, you know, obviously with the discard theme, Inquisition is going to be really nice. Obviously, it doesn't hit a lot of the cards in the format, but just having that increased flexibility is going to be very nice in this deck. And then trying out 4 Thirst instead of 4 Push, just kind of like a experiment. Because I feel like Thirst could be a bit better of a removal spell, especially in this type of deck where getting Revolt on Fatal Push is next to impossible. Yeah, it is possible if like we, you know, get a Davriel down or a Sorin down or something like that, but it's going to be very hard to get Revolt. So I think Fatal Push, or I think Bloodchief's Thirst is going to be the better removal spell. And then in the sideboard, we get some pretty cool options. Obviously, not being a Lurrus deck, we get to play Leyline, which is great against Phoenix, and then great against Food, and then you can bring it in against Auras, but probably not. Necromentia, great card in this type of themed deck, great against like Niv Mizzet, that type of thing. And then Cry the Carnarium, I think we want to play this in the sideboard as compared to putting in the main deck in place of Path of Peril. I think this is probably the best sweeper in the format, at least in these colors, I should say. You know, just having the flexibility of cleaving it with the small white splash is pretty nice. And I think, you know, there are not that many big creatures in the format. Lurrus is a pretty big part of the format, so I think just getting the creatures with mana value to 2 or less is still going to be pretty relevant. So, you know, I think it's pretty worth testing out. And I think it's just a pretty cool card. Other than that, we do have Citadel and Onyx as kind of big mid-range control matchup cards that can really just win the game out of nowhere. And then Massacre Worm as a aggressive card that, or not aggressive card, but a card that's good against aggressive cards that could come in, obviously, against aggressive decks. But yeah, that was Mono Black. And with that, I'm going to close out the video now. I really hope you guys enjoyed this type of different video. I know it's very different from the Pioneer content that I've been putting out lately and the just MPG Online content. So I hope you guys at least have some type of interest in the Arena format, or I guess the Arena client with the historic format, I should say. Obviously, there are a lot of things that, you know, I think could be changed with the client, the economy, that type of stuff. But I think, as I kind of alluded to in the intro, the free-to-play nature of the format is really what I like about it. I think just, you know, being able to play Magic for free is really nice, especially being able to play Magic for free with powerful cards that are expensive in real life, such as, you know, Thoughtseize, say like, you know, these some of these lands, even like Reclaimer is pretty expensive. So I think that unique aspect of it is really nice as well, and I hope you guys see the value in the historic format as well. I know there's not so much love for it right now with the paper announcements, which I obviously very understand. If you want to play Pioneer over historic, I definitely understand that. But for me right now, just being able to play online and not having to pay a bunch of money for a deck is really what it comes down to with me. And so, you know, the historic format kind of lines up pretty nicely for me right now, and I hope you guys kind of feel that same sentiment, at least a little bit. And with that, I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. I know it was a bit different from what I usually put out with just the gameplay. But yeah, I really enjoyed putting this video together, so I hope you guys enjoyed watching it as well. And please, you know, leave feedback, consider subscribing, that type of thing. With that, really hope you guys enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching.